Hello, welcome to another episode of Executive Suite. I'm your host, Thomas Braun, and today we're here with Jermaine Murray, who's the founder of Jupiter HR. And Jermaine's got over 100,000 followers on LinkedIn and has been a contributor to CNBC on the subject. So we're very happy to have him here. Jermaine, can you please give us a quick overview of Jupiter HR?
Yeah, and thanks for having me on the show, Thomas. My name is Jermaine L. Murray. I am the founder of Jupiter HR. Online, you may know me as the Job Father. I'm somebody that's trying to help as many people get jobs into tech as possible. I fully believe that we should be in a world where we live to live and not live to work. And making sure that you have a well paying job that gives you that kind of work life balance is a major key to that, and I help people figure out how to make sure that they can get their dream job to live their dream life.
Well, that sounds very promising. Now, you've helped hundreds and hundreds of people
Mhm.
land high quality jobs with some of the biggest tech companies. Have you also helped people get jobs with startup companies?
Yeah, all throughout the entire spectrum. So we have a thing where, in addition to like helping job seekers, we're really passionate about advocating for people from the Black tech community
Hmm.
and helping them find opportunity in an industry where they are woefully underrepresented. We've helped 452 Black people to date, trying to get that number to 500 for like a personal milestone.
Hmm.
And those jobs have been placed at companies as big as the big manga or fan companies to startups that you've never heard of before, but are primed to actually like impact the world on a global stage.
Okay. So now, one of the things people are talking a lot about in HR is the impact of artificial intelligence. And there are a couple of different angles there. But let's start off with how it's impacting the tech job market. Are you seeing people getting laid off or the demand changing because of AI?
People are getting laid off. That is a very unfortunate reality. And it is very Hunger Game-ish is how I would describe what's going on with the job market. I think AI playing a role is a bit more nuanced, to be honest with you. So it's like, um, I do believe that there are tasks right now that AI is able to do. I don't believe AI in its current state, from just what we're seeing, is enough to actually make anybody lose their job from a competency level. But I do see AI as being this blanket tell all excuse that's being used to justify and kind of skirt the PR disasters that come or that should be coming with the number of layoffs that we're seeing. But like, the reality is that AI has pretty much caused havoc within the HR space and in just all spaces right now, and not all of it's good. For HR, your whole entire job is, to be able to assess whether or not someone is a fit for your organization. On paper, that sounds pretty straightforward, but in practice, it's actually really nuanced. Relies a lot on like gut instinct, so to speak, right? But with AI now, every single application is generated by AI. You are very mistrustful of what you are seeing when it comes to things on paper. To make matters worse, now you have to wonder if people are using AI tools. And as a result of that, you have leadership coming down and forcing AI tooling into the actual interview process. I had a friend who was a recruiter and an HR manager who took me aside the other day and told me that her company uses an AI software that tracks the facial components and facial recognition of the candidates to see if they're looking off screen to judge whether or not they're looking at fraudulent or AI tooling to help them fraud and get past the interview stage, right? So even if you like look off, it grades you and then it gives a final grade on whether or not it believes that you were cheating, or if you were an AI agent, or if you were an AI video agent, or if you were like were actually the person that you were. And I find that extremely problematic. But this is the space that we're in when it comes to AI. We've essentially removed the human out of human resources. I think that's a bad dad joke, but we'll let it fly. And it's just making everybody's lives miserable.
Hmm. Oh, that's very interesting. So this is for people who are being they're not being interviewed in person, they're being interviewed remotely.
Yeah.
And so this is the kind of software that they're using to interview people remotely. Well, so is a human being interviewing them remotely, or are they being interviewed by, like, is it just some kind of automatic questions they get asked and have to answer? How does that work?
Interviews are being conducted by humans, but one-way interviews are becoming more and more of a thing. So the tooling that I'm specifically talking about is used in conjunction with a human interviewer, right?
Okay.
It's just to be able to give the interviewers some sort of like the final decision on whether or not to proceed with somebody always relies within the human, but the way that you're supposed to look at it, it's supposed to be some sort of tool that may validate any internal feelings that the interviewer may have that somebody may or may not be being dishonest in an interview, right? And then they can
Hmm.
go based off of that. On the flip side, there are things called one-way interviews where you either record a video to questions that they put on the screen, which I personally hate. I think interviews should always be done person to person. And now you're starting to see companies use AI agents to process applications and initial screenings, which like is a nightmare because people still want to interact with people, right? I haven't met a single person. Like I see the claims all the time online about like how people are using AI agents to like process sales and customer service. I have yet to meet a single person that has been happy or like, takes it well when they find out that they've been talking to an AI agent or they suspect they're talking to like an AI person or an AI generated email. It's always been hostility. So yeah, AI is kind of making a mess of things.
Hmm. So, um, are employers using AI? I guess the small employers don't really need to because they don't have the volume. But are the big employers using AI to screen resumes?
Yes and no. So there are some employers that rely on AI to screen resumes, but a lot of the functions of how AI is used are that it usually ranks the resumes for the recruiter to review, and a lot of times like it's wrong. Like the recruiters actually have to go and do digging. Like a lot of like AI services right now, from what I know, aren't able to verify facts. They aren't able to tell you like whether or not this person worked there. They're not able to tell you um they're not able to tell you like what the company does or if the person is lying. So like you still need that human element in there. And then if you really think about it, like when it comes to like resumes, at least, like if companies were to solely rely on the resumes, AI for resume screening, it would be pretty predictable on how to like cheat the AI, which is something like which has always been like a myth in hiring. You've always had the whole like the ATS auto rejects and like it's never really functioned like that. With this AI thing, it still doesn't function like that, but it does do ranking based on like keywords. And it's up to the recruiter to like assess whether or not that is accurate or if it makes sense. But yeah, we're in a world that seems to be where technology seems to be fostering more and more distrust.
Yeah. So should should people paste their resume into Chat GPT and ask it to make it better or to tailor it for a particular job?
You could, but honestly, like I think you're better off generating a resume that reflects a certain side of your skills and having multiple resumes that do multiple skills. Because one, it's less time consuming and you're less likely to burn out that way. Two, if a recruiter feels like or like a recruiter like there's a difference between like tailoring a job to a resume to a job, and like having Chat GPT pretty much like regurgitate the job description in resume form. If it's the
Mhm.
latter, recruiters are automatically just gonna like bypass and go to the next one. So you got to have some sort of like human element in there. It can't be too perfect. Ironically enough, human imperfection might be the thing that saves us all.
Hmm. Yeah. So I guess things that are generated by AI at this point kind of look the same. You can sort of tell that this looks
Yeah,
like it was written by AI.
yeah, yeah.
But maybe in a few years it'll improve, it'll get better. But I think right now AI is a little bit a little bit oversold in some respects. In other respects, it's a great help. The Now, while we're on the subject of resumes, I noticed you had an article on uh, CNBC where you are a career coach. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Um, okay, and this one that caught my eye was 5 things that people should never put on their resume,
Yeah.
which is pretty helpful because there's so many different styles of resumes, and a lot of people they like to start off with this little sort of statement about themselves, or and of course everybody's wonderful and efficient and
Mhm.
motivated. um I've I've yet to see one where the person says, yeah, sometimes I feel a little bit lazy and I just want to take a nap. But um but anyway, can we go over that? Like, so the first one is a personal summary. So it, tell us about that, and why shouldn't people put that on the top of their resume?
I think for reasons that you just said, like no personal summary sounds like unique. A personal summary has to be by nature very generic, right? It can't talk in like specifics because that's what the resume is for. A lot of times too, recruiters skip over the personal summaries because like there's no like there's nothing of real value there. And people will always say to me like I use a professional or objective or professional summary to like let them know if I have context as to like why I'm changing jobs. And I'm like, what do you think the cover letter's for?
Hmm.
Like cover
Okay.
letter gives you the space to actually breathe and properly tell your story because you're not going to be able to tell it in 2 sentences. So there's no point in keeping it there. When you even think about, when you think about resumes too, um, I tell people that like there's this myth that recruiters only spend 3 to 7 seconds on a resume before deciding what to do with it. And
Hmm.
that is kind of true, but not the whole truth. So my process has always been to like scan a resume, see if it has what I need, and then shortlist it to revisit it again in more detail and more time to fully read through it, right? So you do want to make sure that your resume can not only make that strong first impression, but also on a second read reinforce that first impression. And your objective summary, well, if you think about the way that the brain works, we have this thing where we say that if you were to if you were to fold a resume in half, the everything that is above that fold is the most important real estate of your resume because that is like where the hook in that initial 3 to 7 second scan really comes from, right? And if you're wasting space on an objective summary that like most people are gonna skip anyway, you're doing yourself a disservice, in my humble opinion.
Interesting. Okay. Second, stuffed keywords.
Yeah,
We touched upon that while talking about applicant tracking systems, auto rejecting resumes.
yeah, yeah. So applicant tracking systems do not auto reject resumes. Like I said, for the most part, there's definitely some ways you can tweak like AIs to do it, but again, not I don't think that's very efficient. You won't be getting the best math down that way. But for most companies, ATSs essentially act as filing cabinets, digital filing cabinets. You apply to this job, you're associated with this job, right? Um, People try to stuff as many keywords into their successes, so much so that they like lose cohesion in the story that they're trying to tell with their resume, right? And of course, like I said, now in this age of like AI, um, it comes more across as you not actually reflecting what you did in your career and more just trying to game the system, which like inherently feels dishonest and pisses people off. So like you'll get passed over.
Hmm. Okay. Outdated experience. So, all right. Well, this says focus on your last one or two positions. How, for a young person, I guess it doesn't matter because they don't have that much experience. But as you get on in life, do you have to go back 20 years, like all the way back to when you graduated from from high school or college?
No, so first of all, you always want to optimize your resume. You always make sure that everything that's on it is hyper relevant to the roles, the direction you want to take your career. Secondly, I have this personal rule I call my 3 to 5 year rule, right? If a job experience is older than 3 to 5 years, the only thing of relevance to me is going to just be that it confirms your tenure in what you were doing, right? If you are not actively using those skills, I'm not saying like if you've been at the same job for the last 5 years that like that doesn't count. No, I'm saying anything that happened after prior to that 5 years doesn't really do anything but confirm tenure. And the reason why I say this is because like if you're working in the same job and the job changes over time, that's different. You're still using the core skills of that job. That means your skills are very sharp. That means you're still in tune with your industry. That means like everything that you're doing is relevant, right? But if you are referencing a skill that you used in a job 7 years ago, right? Think about 7 years ago. We're in 2025 now. 7 years is what? 18, right? How different was the world 7 years ago? Right?
Hmm.
It's just the world. We're not even talking about technology where like 7 years ago we didn't even have like anything chat GPT related on our horizon. The world changes. So like the only thing you're confirming to me at that point is tenure, maybe within industry or maybe just as like in your whole entire like career, what that looks like. But after that 3 to 5 year mark, if it's not associated with your current job, I'm looking at an old, stale, out of date skill that you're going to have to ramp up on in order to be effective at this job, which means I'm not going to hire you.
Mm, okay. The next one is images. So don't put your picture on your resume. I don't think we need to talk a lot about that. We'll just tell people don't put your picture on your resume. But one thing I did want to ask you about that might fall into that images category is what about URL square codes? Like some people like to put that on their
Oh,
resume.
like QR code?
Yeah, QR code. Sorry.
Um, I think it's really only effective on your resume if you are at like a conference or something like that. And even then, I would say you're better off like just having like a digital business card with a QR code. I think hyperlinks are better than QR codes. I think hyperlinks on your resume to say a portfolio or like a GitHub is better than having a QR code because like who wants to scan a resume QR code on their phone when they're looking at it on their computer, right? It's just more work and like you're trying to make it as easy as possible for someone to say yes to you.
Okay. So unless you actually have a website because you're, a designer or whatever, then there's no need for it. Filler roles. What's that and why leave them off?
So filler roles are roles that have no relevancy to the job that you're going for. It's like right now we have a lot of people that are in filler roles. So we have a lot of people that used to be software engineers got laid off and to cover the bills they took up a job at a grocery store, right?
Okay,
Uh
I
while
get it.
still they'll continue to code on the side. On their resume, you wouldn't want to put the grocery store.
Okay. So now that's a really sort of obvious example, but what if it was something else like, for example, I'm a lawyer, but I've also been an officer and director of public companies, CEO and founder of a public company. So if I was applying for a law job, do I just leave all of the management stuff off there and just stick to, oh, here are the jobs I've had in my legal career? And just leave it at that. I mean, one fear I think people have is that the person reading the resume might think you're sort of lying through omission or you're deliberately leaving something off. Um, so how should people handle that?
Yeah. So if the position is actually relevant to what you were doing, I would say include it because again, it's
Hmm.
relevant.
Okay.
Uh, there are lies of omission when it comes to your like interviewing or your job search. Leaving off a place that you worked is not a lie of omission, right? If you get like a job offer and they ask to do a background check, the background check is information that you willingly have to submit to the to or to sign off on for like the company doing the background check. And usually what they're looking for is confirmation that you went to places that you've listed on your application, right?
Hmm.
Uh if they find out that you worked at like you worked at a grocery store, or like again you were like leading your own
Hmm.
like consultancy that had nothing to do with the job, that's not going to be a lie of omission. At worst, it'll probably come up, and if they ask you if that's what you're continue doing, and like give you guidelines or let you know that like um if you're going to accept the offer, you have to close off that other opportunity. But that still wouldn't be seen as like a lie of omission. A lie of omission is saying that like you're legally allowed to work in the country that you're in, and you're not. You require like a visa or something, or that um you decide you would say that you don't have a criminal record and you do have a criminal record. That is more of a lie of admission that we're talking about it when in that context.
Interesting. Okay. Um, by the way, you just mentioned visas. I sort of assumed that you were mostly helping people who are already in Canada. Are you also assisting with employers who are recruiting overseas, or people from overseas who are moving to Canada? How are you
Yeah,
into that at all?
we are a globe. We help people all across the world. I've helped people in Canada get jobs in the States. I've helped people in the States get jobs in Japan. I've helped people in Europe get jobs across the EU. So like we are actually a pretty global country or company.
Company. Mhm.
I myself spend like half of my year traveling. I just got back from living 2 years abroad in Spain, and
Nice.
uh, yeah, and we did like you also that also include like a 6 month stay during in Southeast Asia, specifically Thailand, Vietnam, and Taiwan. And like it's good making connections in those places. Thailand specifically, we've helped a lot of people get jobs with startups that have been able to facilitate visas for them to work either out of Thailand, or giving them like a remote option, and like they're able to work in Southeast Asia and then do what we call our visa runs, where they go to another country so that they can reset their time at the previous country. So Thailand, you're allowed to stay up to like 60 days, visa free if you're an American or a Canadian or you have like a British passport. And then you have to leave the country. But you don't necessarily have to have a long wait time to like reset to be able to go back to the country. So we were in Thailand for 60 days. We went to go stay in Vietnam for 30 days, and then we were able to do another 60 days in Thailand.
Nice. Okay. So and you're representing mostly the job seekers, or are you also representing companies?
50-50 actually. So we do
Hmm.
represent job seekers in the sense of helping them figure out their best way to get their next job. And then we do partner with companies in order to help them attract talent, especially black talent,
Hmm.
or help them with like say their talent marketing initiatives.
Interesting. Okay. Now, um, what I want to do was sort of jump back to something we were talking about earlier, which is more about the job landscape, where we
Mm.
talked about AI. AI is being used to a large extent right now as an excuse for some of these large tech companies to lay off large numbers of people. Maybe they hired too many to begin with. I don't know. But one of my previous guests had recently advertised for an IT job as an IT consulting firm. And so, and for like high level IT consulting, where they're rating software, and he got 400 applications. And this is just a small company called MIT Consulting, so which you can see in my previous list of videos. So it's actually the second podcast I did. So 400, that's a lot for yeah, that's just a tiny company. So I mean, that must mean that if Amazon or Google advertise for a job, they probably get 4,000 resumes. So
Yeah.
it's pretty brutal. And he actually said that some of his previous employees who were they got poached by these big companies, and they'd be offered these huge salaries. So they'd be normally maybe making $85,000 a year. They get hired away and they get paid like $250,000 a year. Now they're getting laid off.
Yeah.
And so some of them are realizing that, okay, that was sort of an anomaly um, in my career. And I'm just going to go back to getting $85,000 a year wherever I can, just sort of my normal salary. Others are thinking that, no, this is the new normal. I deserve 250,000. So this is a little bit of an issue there. And what I'm worried about is for new graduates, you're, like in third or fourth year computer science, that's pretty scary thinking that, well, when I apply for a job, there's going to be 400 other people applying, many of whom have experience that I don't have. What are your comments on that? And what kind of advice do you have for people who are facing this situation?
Yeah, I would say, so for the first part of your scenario, I would say that the pandemic did a lot. And I know that's like understating what happened. Well, the pandemic did a lot with regards to there was some inflation with salaries, but like there was also this craze in terms of like this boom that companies were experiencing because of the reliance of the pandemic and on digital products, and like things just went through the roof. So like they were trying to aggressively scale. Now, I'm gonna put my little conspiracy tinfoil hat on for this portion. Um, I do believe that because there was so much growth that happened throughout the pandemic, it wasn't so much the salaries that um, kind of put companies off. That was a part of it, but there was an issue with the way that employees were feeling empowered. Employees felt empowered. They felt like the dynamic was that the workplace had to care about them. You had things like mental health breaks that were being promoted and openly talked about, salary transparencies, the acceptance of different ideologies and identities, but also that like this sentiment that companies, and I rightfully agree with the sentiment, that companies should be grateful that have their workers, and they should invest in making sure that their workers are happy doing the jobs that they do. A big portion of that was also the rise of remote work, which coincided with like employee happiness also shooting up over those years. Um, and my conspiracy theory is that one, um, a lot of CEOs, especially at some of these bigger tech companies, did not like the fact that they were essentially being positioned against each other to go into bidding wars to give people the highest salaries. They did not enjoy this uh, entitlement that employees were having when it came to being treated like humans and not like slaves and worker bots, right? A bit salacious in that description, but nonetheless, they wanted employees to feel grateful to have a job. And then three, there is a lot of overlap between real estate investment, especially corporate real estate investments, and also in terms of like the investments of like other companies, from like office investments to like again having a diverse real estate portfolio. Corporate real estate and e-commerce and commerce just dropped off of the map because of remote work. um and so we see this pushback where where companies want employees to feel isolated, to feel like they have no hope and no other option, and to just be grateful for whatever they get. And in addition to be able to depress salaries, but also to like force people back into the office. And it's like almost like a little bit of like a collusion at that forefront. Um so when it comes to the younger generation, for example, or sorry, when it comes to like this disagreement on things on like, should I just sell for my normal salary or should I continue going for my inflated salary? um I think that it comes down to what the person's like individual interests and responsibilities dictate for their situation. The last thing I would say about the pandemic as well is that it also fostered a lot of consolidation. A lot of companies were acquired, a lot of talent was consolidated all into one spot. I'll use Microsoft as an example. I'm a huge video game fan. At the end of 2024, Microsoft now owns one third of the video game industry. They are the largest independent publisher in the entire video game industry. They spent over $70 billion acquiring that third of the industry. If you go back to even prior to the pandemic when they bought things like Minecraft, that number balloons, right? Um, and so when you have all this consolidation going on as well, it also makes the field less competitive, both for the consumer and the employee, right? Because if the same three companies own everything, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Hmm.
that's why competition is so important. So it was a bunch of different factors that all hit at the same time. And then we have, I would say, then the intersectionality of like war in the Ukraine, the instability in the Middle East, and then of course, the rise of AI and the economy.
Well, yeah, and I think it makes it really tough for people who are in university. If you're in a program that's say 4 years long, and the world's changing so fast, and you wonder, is my program going to be relevant when I graduate? Or am I going to be replaced by a robot or AI or something like that? So, do you have any advice for people who are in that position? If you're in third, fourth year computer science and you're looking at what when you went into it, it looked fantastic, and you thought, I'm going to get a job for tons of money working at Amazon, and now it's kind of like I'm going to be lucky to get a job at a startup company. Because they're getting 400 resumes for one position. What do you have to say to those people?
I would say that I understand your first and foremost. I would say, your feelings are totally valid. Um, and it is an unfair thing, but like that is the reality that we're unfortunately faced with. So we have to be strategic here. And I would say that you also have a very unique opportunity of still being in school when all of this is taking off. And like something that I didn't realize until well after I left school is that my school was a perfect environment for experimentation, for collaboration, for access to people that I don't have access to anymore, or like our relationship has been so like we haven't been in touch that we have no relationship anymore. So I would encourage people to start building projects or using this emerging technology to make their lives as students easier. Maybe not necessarily like the actual like chat GPT thing, but like building out custom workflows for yourself, building out automations, experimenting with AI agents, and like developing your critical thinking and analysis skills around how to use these technologies. And it all starts out with like experimenting and just like having a blast with them and the people around you. Find a way to gamify it. And make sure you document everything on the step of the way, because that is what you're going to want to use to kind of give yourself an edge over everyone else that comes out of or comes into this environment. I wasn't joke like I was semi joking before when I said like the job market is basically like the Hunger Games, but like in all seriousness, it really is the Hunger Games. Like it is survival of the fittest. There are fewer resources than we're all comfortable having, and like an overwhelming response. This is like a very perverted example of supply and demand. So you have to do what you can to like survive, and survival of the fittest. It is very I think it's very Darwin to say that, but like I think that's the reality. And like you are of the age where you have the energy, the time, the mental capacity, and the connections centralized in your university or in your school to like build stuff that you can add. Give yourself your own internship, and you would be a lot better off.
Okay. Well, that sounds like very sage advice. It's probably not a bad place for us to wrap up our conversation. I want to thank you for sharing your experience and wisdom and letting me pick your brains about resumes and applying for jobs and other things. Did you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. So, three things I wanna say. One, I wanna say that, like, take comfort in knowing that this has happened several times throughout history. Like, technology always causes disruption, and, like, the powers that be always try to, like, get rid of, like, human labor entirely. But it is also a time that comes with, like, a lot of great innovation, and a lot of ways technology democratizes, the playing field. So, it makes us have a lot more ownership in our future. And um for me personally, the best way for me to work through anxiety and fear is to actually like work and get my hands on building something. It can be relevant to your career, like I mentioned, the projects, but also like take care of your mental health, and like finding ways to get busy with your hand and your mind is one of the best ways to like prepare yourself for the future. Secondly, I would encourage everybody to read the Ernest Hemingway poem Invictus. Um, it's something about like personal conviction, and it's something that's really good for like a mantra to keep your spirits up. And lastly, I would encourage um, in respect to your fear, use your fear to power your intellectual curiosity, because your intellectual curiosity is what essentially is going to allow you to adapt and be prominent in any era or any direction you go. A quote that I wrote yesterday, and I'm proud of this quote. A quote that I wrote yesterday in like a sage mode I was in, was that insecurity is the best friend of ignorance, but the enemy of intelligence. I try to go through life believing the wisest thing I could do is assume I know nothing and be eager to educate myself.
Hmm.
So I would say I would close off on that, and I would say thank you for having me on the podcast, Thomas.
Well, it's been my pleasure. And for our viewers, thank you for watching. And if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. And until next time, goodbye for now.